Let me begin with a personal introduction. My name is Shamsul Amri Baharudin, or simply Shamsul, an anthropologist from Malaysia. I was recently promoted to the position of distinguished professor. There are only 3 in the country, in Malaysia, and I'm one of them, and I always wonder why an anthropologist could become a distinguished professor. But I think one of the most important selection criteria is not only of my academic contribution, but also my public advocacy, in the sense that what can I contribute as an anthropologist to the society. Because I think in Malaysia, you can become a professor, which is viewed or perceived as an academic expert, but it is not enough to become an academic expert. You also must contribute to society. And I think for that reason, I was made the distinguished professor. Why do I come to Toulouse? I came to Toulouse because at the invitation of Professor Jean-Pierre Paulin, who is the head of the Department of Tourism, Hospitality and Food Studies at the faculty here, and he is interested to do some work and cooperation with me and also my colleagues in Malaysia. So I was here for 2 days. I'm beginning to enjoy the sunshine of Toulouse, and then I was called back by Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia. He said there was an emergency, and I wonder why social anthropologist is needed for emergency. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, and I'm not a medical man, but I need to go back for emergency reason. The reason why I was requested to go home was because there was a problem relating to a textbook used by secondary school students. It's a novel, a Malay novel, a story about how 3 different groups of ethnic groups in Malaysia, Malay, Chinese and Indians, went through their journey and came to Malaysia through all the difficulties. And the name of this novel is Interlocking in English, Interlock, written by a famous author. His name is Abdullah Hussein. This book was published in 1971, long ago, but it was selected as a textbook quite recently because of the multi-ethnic nature of the book, and because the book tries to give a picture of difficulties and also success and problems in multicultural, multi-ethnic society. However, there was a section written on the Indian, and one of the parents or some of the Indians were not happy with the terminology Pariah caste or Kasta Pariah, because it is very derogatory, and they consider that not good to be told to the children. So they want the terminology to be deleted from the book. Well, there was a lot of discussion in the country, and in fact, the book was burned because some communities of the Indian, some extremist group from the Indian thought that the book should be withdrawn. But the government didn't withdraw the book. The government said, we keep the book, but we make changes. And because of that, the book was burned. The photograph of the author was burnt, and there was a big international reaction to that too. So the Prime Minister and the Malaysian Cabinet set a special committee, a panel, independent panel, to study what are the changes of the book. And I was appointed as the chairman of the panel. Now, it is not an easy job, because what I'm seeing is a small fire in the Malaysian ethnic relations, which I have to put out like a fireman. So it is for this committee that I worked in the last 2 months. Yeah? And we have made suggestion what changes could be done. And then we decided to submit all this list of changes to the Minister of Education, who is also the Deputy Minister. And then I came to Toulouse. I thought I have solved the problem. Then I realized the problem was not solved, because the representative from the Indian community, 3 of them, decided to walk out of the committee. So I was called back to convene the committee and find a new solution. So I went back and found a new solution. And after 3 days of discussion and negotiation, 2 days of sleepless nights, we managed to resolve, with the help of the Minister of Education, of course. When he chaired the meeting, we managed to reduce all the problems and agree to the solution. So it had a happy ending. And he had to report to the parliament, because there were 16 different questions in the parliament, oral and also written questions on the subject. So he wrote a response, a long response, which is interesting response, and now the issue is considered closed. The book originally is a novel, but when it was made into a student edition, it was abridged. It means it was summarized, or it was shortened without changing the storyline, which the author agreed, of course, because this is a standard procedure for producing books for children. And then when it was protested, the author agreed to change the word and many more words. But that was before the issue came public. When the book was made a book for the parents, for the children, and the parents read them, some parents wrote to the publisher saying that I don't agree with this word and this word and this word. So a list of words. And then was sent to the author, and the author agreed to change. But the irony of it all is that when the Indian changed this, request for change, but they did not write and ask the author, they immediately tell the press. So the author was not very happy, because his photo, his book, he was very sad. And he's 90 plus, and he's deaf, he can't hear. So every time I see him, I have to write on a piece of paper, how are you? And then he will say, yes, I'm good, you know. So it's a very difficult communication. But he is a very kind man, very high integrity man, and he agreed to the changes. And when the Deputy Prime Minister, he agrees. The book episode demonstrates the nature of Malaysian society. Malaysian society, I believe there is no minority. There is only small majorities, because there is a standard multicultural or plural society terminology. There is majority society, there is minority society. Yes, in Singapore, 80% Chinese and 20% other ethnic group. In Indonesia, 90% local and 5% Chinese or something. But in Malaysia, 50% local and 50% migrant population. So it's not two minorities. But of course, the locals are divided into native of Sarawak, native of Sabah, and then the Muslim. So it is an interesting society, divided by religion, divided by region, East Malaysia, West Malaysia, divided by ethnic group, divided by economic activities, like for example, Chinese is in business, Malays will be mainly in the rural area and doing jobs in the government office. So this diversity is incredibly rich diversity, but it is also a situation where I would call a stable tension, where we don't know when an ethnic problem would crop up. We don't know when the society could become problematic and conflict. And we had a big conflict in 1969, but mainly in Kuala Lumpur, but not all over the country. But still, the country felt the trauma of that conflict. And I was then in high school when the conflict happened. So for me, from then on, 1969 until today, there's no more conflict in the country in the way that happened in 1969. So we experience social cohesion. We don't experience unity, because unity is the one that we dream of. Integrity is what we dream of. But we experience social cohesion. We agree to disagree. We accommodate. Some assimilate. We do a lot of cultural borrowing from each other. And of course, there's a lot of intermarriage too. So there is an interesting blending of the population. And so much so that Malaysia has become a model to many developing countries that has so many ethnic population. So it has become a very interesting country to be a case study of ethnic relations. And to Malaysians, it is interesting because it is always discussion on ethnic grievances. So I would like to say that in Malaysia, there's a lot of tongue-wagging argument about ethnic differences. But there's no parang. Parang is machete. There's no parang wielding. That means we don't fight, but we fight verbally. We don't fight physically. So that's what Malaysia is. And that is why it has become example to many countries around the world. Well, historically, Malaysia is already, it's made up of probably 9, 10, 15 different components. Yeah, Malay states with sultans. I mean, Malaysia has 9 sultans in the whole country. The largest collection of sultans in the world in Malaysia. Yeah, bigger than the Middle East. So, but these sultans have agreed to be together and create a federation during the colonial period. So, this diversity is already there because Malaysia is made up of many small states. A bit like the Emirates, yeah? Like many small states. And therefore, we have practiced federalism. But federalism is not a new idea in Malaysia. There is a small state in Malaysia called Negeri Sembilan. 9 states. Inside that state, there are 9 small parts. And these 9 small states, the leaders of them have agreed to invite a leader from Sumatra, from Indonesia, to be their boss. This is in 1776, before the American Declaration of Independence. So in 1776, a confederation was already created in Malaysia, in what is called Tanah Melayu, or the Malay Peninsula. And I think this history of willing to accept leadership, different people, variety is inherent in our society. So when the British came and imported Indian and Chinese workers, we were already used to having Thai and Siamese and people from Indonesia, from other region, the Middle East, Portuguese, because the Malacca Straits is very famous. Yeah, Venice and Malacca are the 2 cities of the world. Yeah, entrepot of the world, and we have received Italian, we have received Chinese for centuries. So I think Malaysia is the country that have experienced multiculturalism before the word was invented. What happened during colonial period and in the formation of Malaysian society is this. When the British came, the state and the church were already separated in Europe. So when the British came, they decided to look after the state but not the church. Here, church means religion. Yeah? So they gave the power of the religion and the customs and looking after the traditional, the traditional life of Malaysia to the Sultan. So the Sultan looks after religion and the British looks after the state. So the state and church were run by 2 different groups. But the British has the final say. So the British was having an indirect rule. They are ruling, but it's through the Sultan. So that structure apparently become very useful because the local feel they are still in power, but actually they have no power. So unlike in Australia or New Zealand where there are settler communities, where the Aborigines were killed, thousands of them. But in Malaysia, the indigenous people becomes the platform of colonizing. So I would call Malaysia was a host society and Australia and New Zealand a settler society. So the host society is a combination of peaceful intervention, mostly. And that's why we begin to receive foreign laborers from China, from India, from different parts of Indonesia, brought by, especially by the British. So I think that becomes the social factors that weaved all this relationship. And the British created a legal system which is federalist based to allow, it's a bit like Rubik Cube. You know? It allows to be pulled, but it comes back again. So there is space for differences to be expressed. But there is also a framework to make sure everyone comes together. So I think this is what we are looking at in Malaysia. Well, I think the role of anthropology in trying to understand what happens in Malaysia politically and what lessons can be learned by other countries from the context of Malaysia, especially in the relationship between anthropology and the nation state. I think anthropology gives you a deeper understanding of the people you are dealing with. You have no choice. You have to know what they do, what they like to eat, what they like to wear, what religion, where do they pray, how they pray, is very sensitive and very important. It's not enough top down. A government that will tell you that this is good for you, it's not good enough. You have to listen to the people, and the voices of the people could be expressed and explained in detail by anthropological research. This is what we realize in Malaysia. The contribution of anthropology from Malaysia is very, very important to give the ground bottom-up feedback on many things, on development, on poverty, on literacy, on gender issues. And this information has become, or this technique has become part of the government techniques at the bottom to employ many anthropology graduates. And you must understand, anthropology graduates is important in marketing too, in the business sector. Why? When you want to market something in Malaysia, you are not marketing the product only, you are marketing tastes. You are marketing choices, color, what is symbolistic and important symbolically to a Chinese. The color is red. To the Malay, the color is yellow, royal family. Red is luck. So when you sell things to Malay and Chinese, for example, they have to be packaged in different color. Now that's where anthropology plays an important role in advertising. So in a way, in a market sense, anthropologists help to peddling of cultures, how they sell culture. I think that is the other role which a lot of people didn't realize that anthropologists could play and is playing today. Well, there are three important components when you want to understand the relationship between ethnicity, society, and politics. For me, as a trained in sociology and in anthropology, there are three big components. One is the society. Society is the base of everything. The society also creates state to help to organize itself politically. And there is market that the society creates too, because they have to eat, they have to do activities. The question is, how does society interact with state and with market? And how powerful is the state over society? And how powerful the market is over society? So the struggle in any society in the world is this triangular struggle of power relations, dominance. So when the state is too dominant and the government, we have non-governmental organization. When the market is too dominant, we have social responsibility, corporate social responsibility. So we can see how adjustments. And ethnicity comes in the context of Malaysia. It's not identity, but specific identity, which is ethnicity, becomes very important. In the market, ethnicity is important because you sell product to different groups of ethnic different ethnic groups. Different ethnic groups have different sense of symbolism, taste, and so on. You cannot sell pork to a Muslim population. So you have to know what to sell to the Muslim population. What is the keyword, the brand halal. Now, the same thing politically. In the state has three different sets of rules: civil law, Sharia law, and native law. And we have to navigate between these three law system, legal system. So the state has got its own. So when the ethnic factor enters into the state, then you have to talk in terms of political parties. You have to talk in terms of justice system, and you have to talk in terms of native laws. What I can do to progress and to show how anthropology and sociology can progress in deepening our understanding of Malaysia is this way. Many people don't realize, and actually around the world, people don't realize how important is the 8 hours we spend working. We always talk about 8 hours, we earn money, we become middle class and high income society. We never imagine that 8 hours in a country like Malaysia, 8 hours we postpone our ethnic differences. Why? That is a time when we have to make money. We want to have that money because we want to send our children to university. We want to become rich. We want to climb the social ladder and become middle class. So the 8 hours every day in Malaysian life, 5 days a week, is critical in a way, indirectly, in maintaining stability in the country. And that is what we haven't studied in detail. So I think the role of anthropology and sociology is to look at this. This is what I call everyday form of authority. How everybody, the social actors, the agency, actually is the active contributor to the maintenance of what I call social sustainability in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religious differences, in terms of socio-economic. There's no use having a lot of money, but if you cannot maintain some form of social sustainability, which means people are happy to have money, but all of them are happy to have money, but they are also all of them unhappy because they don't have enough. So, but if you have one group over the other is overly unhappy, and this is where the quarrel comes. So even though rich country like in Australia, you see ethnic problems until today. The Aboriginal is still there because they are totally in a difficult situation. So I think this is where we can learn and where anthropology can contribute to understand deeply, not only deep but also broadly, what is the role of ethnicity at work. Okay, there are three levels of economics in the country. The primary economics, product, rubber, rice, and this, and tin. And then the secondary level, the secondary sector, which is manufacturing and so on. And the third is the service sector. Now, there is ethnic identity in Malaysia at the level of primary. Malay grow rice, Chinese work in tin mines, Indian works in plantation. This is the stereotype. And then manufacturing, Malay girls, young girls working in microchip companies. But in service industry, which includes tourism, which includes hospitality, which include food production in a large quantity, and what I call ethnic food too, is the reverse of the first two economies. We sell different food, we sell ethnicity, we sell familiarity, and we sell differences to tourists not only in Malaysia but outside the world. We create clothes and whatnot. So I think tourism, hospitality, and food studies are very relevant to understand one of the biggest contributor to income for Malaysian income is from the tourist industry. Well, probably a lot of people will be interested to know why in the end I become an anthropologist, To tell you frankly, I'm not interested in becoming an anthropologist at all. I have no imagination. I was just interested to become a singer, a pop singer. I mean, I grew up in the days of Bob Dylan, Beatles, and Janis Joplin, and Rolling Stone. So why do I want to study anthropology? I mean, this is the way to hippie. I mean, this is all these big ideas in my head. Oh, I wish I was with the flower people. Jimi Hendrix was playing the music, and I was in a band, and my band was the champion band in the whole of Malaysia. So not bad for a singer to be in number one band in the country, but it doesn't give me any money. I cannot go anywhere. My friends are all having beautiful cars, beautiful wives, and I was struggling with my band. Because that was before the introduction of Sony Walkman. Because Sony Walkman revolutionized pop music in the world. It also revolutionizes what I call counterfeit business. So after that, it was during the university time I begin to realize, because I was doing the singing during university time, that I realized that, and that was the time the ethnic riot occurred in 1969. So in 1970, when I went to university, I chose to do sociology and anthropology, because I said, okay, I have to understand what is this society that is producing violence at the same time, very nice to people, but at the same time violent. Why? So that brought me to sociology and anthropology, and finally my PhD in Australia. I did focus on social anthropology because I was interested not only on a macro society, but I was interested in the micro. How the dynamics at the village level and the community level can inform us and what happens in Malaysia. So I was looking for Malaysia in a village rather than a village, global village. Yeah. So that's why I ended up in doing anthropology, because of that interest that I have. And I observed the changes of the society, and I thought that this is more closer to my heart. After all, I fail as a singer. Not fail as a singer, but I cannot make income and I cannot work as a singer in the music world. Well, the reason was quite simple. I sang in Malay, so the music was only for the market is segmented, ethnically segmented. Chinese market, Indian market, Malay market. And you sing for Malay market, you only have a 30%, 50%. But the music industry is controlled by Chinese business. So, and Chinese business is based in Hong Kong. So is the movie. So the Malay market is very small until Sony Walkman comes. Then the market exploded. Well, I became a lecturer, and for 20 years, I became a lecturer in 1976. In 1977, I was made, 1997. After 20 years, I was made the dean. Before that, I refused to become a dean. I refused to become head of the department. I refused to become deputy dean. Why? I thought, if you want to become academic, be number one in your field. Then, if you are an academic leader, then you can become a bureaucratic leader. Why? Whatever decision you make in bureaucracy, your lecturer will look at you and say, he has done it. He is known in the world for that he's doing. So when he asks us to achieve something, he has done it before. So I think that is the reason why I waited for so long until I became a professor. Then I accepted the post of the dean. And then I was asked to revive a research institute which was dying. So I revived it. But the biggest challenge was to establish new research institutes, which means to think of ideas how to establish one. It's called Institute of Occidental Studies, the first ever Institute of Occidental Studies in the world. So in my university, they don't know what is Occidentalism. Some of them thought, they wrote a letter to me and they said, OX, they think I'm an ox, Occidental, so they think I'm a big buffalo or big cows, because this is a new term. And then the next institute I set up in 2007 was Institute of Ethnic Studies. And that's where I am now, because I think this is where my strong point is. Well, I'm not very far away from a frequent flyer professor, but I won't tell you which frequent flyer I belong, because probably I belong to all of them. It is interesting. I tell you the origin, why I became international. In 1979, in 1976, I received my MA thesis. In 1979, I made my first trip overseas to Perth to present a paper called The Development and the Underdevelopment of Malaysian Peasantry, which is based on Andrew Gunder Frank on All Dependency School, looking at peasantry. In English, 43 pages I wrote. But I have no money to go to the conference. And I only have an MA, I have no PhD. What I did was I registered, and then I bought a ticket. At that time, there was a company called Fly Now, Pay Later, which means that I put 300 ringgit, I pay the next 900 ringgit 3 months, 300. So for the first conference, I went out by myself. And I think that is the one that set the standard for me. You want it, you go. You don't wait. You don't wait for Malaysia to give you money. You have money, you keep your money, you go. And until today, I don't wait. If people invite me, I go. Even half, they said, okay, we can only pay this much. It doesn't matter. I will go. So I think that attitude is the most important thing. As a result of that, it took me to ASEAN, I guess, in 1986. I was 3 months in Paris. My first ever to Europe was to Paris. And I changed my worldview. I didn't see the colonial British important anymore. I saw French and German tradition, and the Dutch are very important in the academic world. And then I went to US, and I was in Japan. I was working in a museum in Japan for 1 year and a half, and then I was also in Sweden and Denmark, of course, and finally I was in Latin America. So I did go around the world a bit in the last 20 odd years, and I have made many friends all over the world. And I also receive students from all over the world. Either they come and register with me as an MA or PhD student, or my friends who are professors in France, in Germany, in Holland, in Japan will send their PhD student to do research in Malaysia, and I will become the local research supervisor. So this interaction and network has been there before the notion of network become a KPI. I have already set it as my own KPI. Well, when I was appointed the distinguished professor, one of the things that I have to do or requested was to advise the Malaysian Ministry of Higher Education on matters relating to governance and public policy relating to higher education. So this is the job that I've been doing. Many committees I've been inducted into and helped. Now, my perspective is this. There was a time when university was seen as an ivory tower, which is probably a 12th century, 14th century idea of university in Europe, and it is related to the church. Otherwise, we don't wear all those nice things that looks like a church procession, and we do that in Islamic country, mind you. So for me, I can see that role of university has changed with the democratization of knowledge and also education. With the concept of lifelong learning, university now has become like a port. The ship will go in and out, an entreport, international. So first the student will go for 3 years for his undergraduate degrees, and then he go out and work. So he takes a boat and go somewhere and work. And then he comes back to do his master's in business administration or another master's in engineering. And then he goes out again. And then he comes back for a diploma of ethnic studies or something. And then he goes out again. And then later he comes back for his PhD. So the university now is no more like the tall tree where you climb. The university now is there, flat on the floor. You come and visit us whenever you want. And I think this is a very important role the university has become. As a result of that, the university's intervention and into society is inevitable. It has to participate. It has to become. It has to create its own university social responsibility scheme or thinking. So they must now participate consciously in the society, not indirectly. So I think whether in Europe, whether in Malaysia, whether in Asia, I think the universities have become social actors in themselves. Very powerful social actors because they provide academic analysis and they also suggest and create public advocacy. Well, there are 2 or 3 levels of politics we are going to talk about. Number one, the general level about politics as a philosophy, politics as a way we organize ourselves. Epistemologically, politics is about power relations. Yeah? And in that sense, anthropologists can be a participant at any time, and sociologists. Mind you, in Malaysia, 8 of my friends who are anthropology, sociology graduate have become ministers. So there is a second level of politics, which is political parties. So there are anthropologists and sociologists who did not become a professor, who did not become distinguished professor, but distinguishes themselves in the political party scenario. And they make policies. They get involved. But they also consult their friends who are the academician. So then the second level and the first level comes together. And the third level is when politics is about protest, is about ordinary people, grassroots. And I think that's where the anthropologists can mediate between the elite, politician, and all their misunderstanding and all their fear about their position could only best understood and explained and mediated through the anthropologists. I think that is our role, because the more refined and the higher we become, the more refined, the more policy oriented in the way we do things, the easier for us to become the interlocutor between those at the grassroots and those who are running the country. So we speak both languages, the language of power and the language of resistance. And I think that's a powerful job that anthropology has.